going to know. You're never going to be ready. You can listen to every podcast you want, read every book, take every CSAM course you want. You're never going to be ready. Just go and do it. Now, that said, part of the reason why I made such a big return on my first deal was due to the cap rate compression.
As an operator, I know other investors are romanticizing multifamily investing, and I'm looking to learn from other investors' mistakes. I know you are too, and you found the right place. Welcome to Myers Methods Presents Multifamily Missteps. Hey everybody, and welcome to Myers Methods Presents Multifamily Missteps. I'm your host, Jerome, and I've got Joseph Bramante with me today. Did I get it right?
You got it right, man. Good job.
I appreciate it. I usually ask beforehand to make sure I get it right. Do me a favor, Joe. So will you let the listeners know how they can get in touch with you?
Yeah, so you can get in touch with me on LinkedIn. It's probably the best way. Just search for me, Joseph Bramante, TriArc Real Estate Partners. Also, you can send us an email, info@triarcrep.com. You can always check out our website as well. We got a lot of good content there. We just revamped it, so really excited for you guys to even check it out. And it's triarcrep.com.
Perfect. And so you're down in Houston, and I've heard you on a few different podcasts, and I was like, man, I want to reach out because he's telling a real story, having real talk on these podcasts instead of making it a fairy tale. So let's go to your background and kind of what you've been focused on recently, and then we'll dive into the deals.
Yeah, so background's oil and gas, engineer, civil engineer by trade, and went to work for Exxon after college. Did that for 5 years. I worked overseas for them on their major capital projects division. I was on a $22 billion project, of which about $1 billion was my cost that I controlled, and just did a lot of numbers. I was a spreadsheet jockey for like 3 years, and just, we're rounding to the nearest $1 million. So it was a lot of really big numbers, and you just kind of get used to looking at those kind of things, and then kind of jumped into real estate more so as a hobby. Never intended to make a company out of it. It was just, my managers were all rotating back and forth from Papua New Guinea, which is where I was based at the time. So every time they would come back from rotation, it seemed like they always had a new rental property. And I just got tired of their stories all the time. So I was a bit of a showman and wanted to show them up. So I went and looked into it. And at first I was going to buy like 80 houses. And then, we'd had this big spreadsheet, and for some reason we felt we needed $3 million to buy 80 houses up front, and kept trying to get a loan for $3 million. And all these banks kept laughing at me and hanging up. And finally, one of them just said, "You go buy an apartment complex." And so we did. And that was just kind of how we got started. We did some research. We read a lot of books, or I read a lot of books, and that was it. I read like 6 books and bought a complex. No podcasts, no mentors, no nothing. I wasn't even in the same side of the world. I was in Papua New Guinea, so I didn't even see the property. So it kind of gives you a little bit about my mindset.
Clearly, you got to take action mindset, and afraid of, making that jump from. So did you even own a house at that point, or was it your first transaction buying an apartment complex?
I did own a single house. It was also not a rental. I've actually only owned one house in my entire life. That was that one that I purchased for a friend, which again kind of tells you, I was making really good money, over $200 a year, and so a friend of mine needed some help. She had just gotten divorced and got tired of seeing her and her kids go from apartment to apartment. So I said, "Fine, let me just buy a house for you, and you'll rent it from me. You'll just pay the mortgage, and I'll build my credit because I've got nothing to do with the money." So I did. So I kind of went through the motions and bought a house, but not really as a purely investment deal. It was more of a kind of humanitarian deal.
Got it. And so let's talk about the first deal, because it's the one I know the most about, but you said you haven't really done a deep dive on the challenges that went with it. I know a lot of great things happen on the backside, but let's really dig into it. So let's talk about it. It's like a 24 unit or something, right?
26 units. And it took us about 6 to 9 months to even find that one property. And the way it came about was, well, first we had to find brokers, right? So we're fresh in the industry, and the only thing we knew was LoopNet. I think it's still around today, and everybody kind of goes there, and it's kind of where properties go to die now that I know. But in the beginning, I didn't know. So we went to LoopNet, and the biggest thing we did on there is we just got the contact info for all these brokers, and finally found a broker who would, give me the time of day. And this guy was just as crazy as they came, had like 10 cats, was always posting cat videos. It was really weird. But anyway, we decided to do a deal with him, and he's showing us all this stuff. And finally we identified this one property, and the story was that it was a guy who was retiring. He had owned two properties that were next to each other, and we couldn't afford the larger one. But we could afford the smaller one. So we purchased the smaller one. And then as soon as we closed on it, well, this is jumping ahead, but actually I'll skip that part. So we closed on this property. So it's a 26 unit property. We find it and we put in our money, and we submit our LOI, put in our money. And at the time, all of our pro forma, it was like a single page Excel. I mean, we could have done it on a napkin. It was really like just the basics, and we didn't even do it. It was our broker who did it for us, and we looked at it and said, yeah, it looks right to me. That's what the books say. So, all the math was everything I read in the book, and I thought it was just that simple. And I think, in a way, multifamily has really come into its own. I think back in the day, I really do think it was that simple. It wasn't as nearly as sophisticated as it is now, but that's just my opinion for doing it and just from what I've heard from people. But anyway, so we're looking at this super simple Excel file, and he put in some number of 3,000 a door, and he kind of set our rehab budget because he said, it needs about 3,000 per door. And so that's what we underwrote to, is 3,000 a door. So we go in, and the numbers looked good. I don't even remember what the return was. And to be honest, I don't think we were looking to make a big return on our first deal. We were just looking to get a deal done. And I went, and I actually, my original partner, as I told you, I was working with a guy, or maybe I didn't tell you, but I was working with a friend initially who had like 5 rental houses, and he was the one who had like the most real estate experience of all of us. And we're all at Exxon. And I said, well, hey man, why don't you, let's teach me how to do this rental house thing. And that's when we got the idea of buying 80 houses. And then once I got the word from the banker, they said, go buy an apartment complex. I kind of went the apartment route, and he didn't want to come with me because he was, he didn't know it, I guess, or I forget exactly why. But anyway, he did not want to come with me. And so then we go and I find a new partner, and we put up, 50-50 on this deal. And I don't even know what he was thinking because he didn't know anything about real estate. And I guess I must have really done a sales job on him. But
so it's the blind leading the blind. The broker gave you a half-baked pro forma. You read a few books but didn't have the experience, and your partner didn't do anything. He was just following your lead because you're a strong leader. And so you guys get into the deal, and what happens?
Yeah, so I wouldn't even call it a half baked. Like he mixed the pancake batter in the bowl for us and gave us a bowl, and we had to figure out how to bake it. So we had to set the temperature and the time and everything. It was a mess. And the thing is, looking back, I was as confident as could be going into this, and maybe that just is my personality because, I had read all these books, and the tricky thing about books, and I'd say with podcasts and everything, like you guys listening to me now, like we're giving you a lot of knowledge, but really the knowledge is like kind of 30,000 foot level, and it's a completely different animal when it comes down to like, when the rubber meets the road and you're actually doing it, and there's nobody holding your hand to do it. And that's kind of where I got myself into. And that's kind of the advice I give to anybody is like, look, you can watch, 1,000 hours of podcasts. You can watch 10,000 hours of podcasts. It'll never make up for you actually doing 10,000 hours of work. And eventually you're just going to have to jump and do it. So I just jumped and did it. So we went in and we put this property under contract, put the earnest money down. And up to that point, everything felt very familiar to me as far as buying that first house. You know, I was like, okay, I remember this step, like this contract's very similar. I think it was the exact same contract. It was a small deal. So we're using the same contracts. And so I'm going through the motions, and I'm doing this like I would buy a house. So I'm doing the same due diligence that you would do for a house. So we got a PCA, property condition assessment, and they say, oh, roofs are shot. And I was like, okay, cool, no worries. We got this money planned for that. And we had the most crazy air conditioning system, if you want to call it that. They had window units, and everybody's familiar with window units. So we had window units that were blowing into the fur down, and then from there it would get dispersed throughout the unit. Well, the problem with that is those window units don't have enough BTUs to cool down an entire apartment unit, and the volume of air coming out of that is so slow that it builds up moisture within the ductwork, and then you get a lot of really undesirable things growing within that ductwork. So, we just thought I just admired it from, just the South Texas, redneck kind of perspective. I was like, wow, that's some redneck engineering right there. Like, kudos to that guy for even doing it. But I digress. So we kind of laughed more at that than we should have. So we get into this deal, and we're like, okay, cool. Everything seemed okay, right? Like, okay, it's got walls and everything's there, but we're not scoping sewer lines. And honestly, I don't know really what I did for 30 days other than we just kind of sourced the financing, because the first time you do financing is a lot of work as well. And we had very little prep pre-contract for the financing side. So we're kind of figuring that out on the fly as well to get the loan. And also in the middle of all that, somehow we got tangled up with this company, ABC funding, whatever. And I do remember spending a lot of time on that because there was a 100% fraudulent thing. They were trying to get us to, put up some origination fees, and it was actually not even a real company. And I proved it, but I don't know why. I took one of this rabbit hole during the contract, proved that this guy, and I had like Google screenshots of like their actual office that they claimed was in London. It's actually a library. But anyway, it was a complete waste of time that I had none to be wasting during a contract for no value. And so we're sourcing a loan, and we got this other company called Bank of Internet USA, which actually was a real bank, even though it sounds fraudulent also. And they give us the loan. And so we've gotten a term sheet from them like a week before due diligence ends. So we're like, okay, cool. And they weren't multifamily lenders, which is a big deal. And it's a big deal because multifamily lenders are going to have checklists that you go through that would protect you if you're in a situation like me and you don't know what the hell you're doing. They're going to at least give you some sort of roadmap to like, hey, do these things at a minimum and you'll be okay. I didn't have any of that. So I'm just like filling out loan docs, signing guarantees and stuff, and getting our attorneys to review it. And we gotten so caught up in the contract side of the loan closing. Meanwhile, clock's ticking away, and we get down to, we're in the closing period. We secure our insurance from some company who also was not a multifamily insurance company. It just, again, I'm in Papua New Guinea. I'm Googling insurance, apartments, and just whatever comes up is what I'm doing. I didn't have a peer network to go to or meetup groups or nothing. It was just me and Google in Papua New Guinea trying to figure this out, and some books. And I'm checking the glossary in the back of the books. They don't have any comments on insurance or debt. So you're figuring, I'm doing the best I could at the time. So I closed on this deal with Bank of Internet, with this insurance company, and yeah, everything was great. I was like, wow, okay, it wasn't so bad. I thought, I was like, I did it. We're good. And we closed on the deal. And the only issue we had on the closing was like the week after. Oh, we'd also got a contract. We were also interviewing property managers because that was something else you got to do. And because we didn't have one already lined up, so we found a property manager, and this guy was a single family property manager. And he was making his debut in multifamily with us. We were his first ever apartment complex, which, we're thinking, okay, it's small properties, 26 units. We don't have enough money to afford, a full-time person on site. So it made a lot of sense to have an offsite manager and somebody who manages houses. I mean, surely it's very similar. You collect the rent, you take care of the building. What could go wrong? So we hired the guy. So we closed the deal. We got our manager, our debt, our insurance. Everything seems to be okay. Then we give notice to the residents that, hey, we're the new owners. Then the next week, like 15% of people move out. They move actually across the street because the owner was a very hands-on. He was your typical kind of mom and pop operator. He self-managed the deal. He knew all the residents. They knew him. It was a really good it's a really good environment they had. And so now all of a sudden I'm the new guy. And so they got nervous, and it's common. It happens on every property, even properties take over today. You get new management, and people either skip or they send you a whole bunch of work orders that you got to fix that the previous guy wasn't fixing. So we didn't get the work order thing, but we got a lot of skips. So everybody went across the street, which sucked because we could, they're across the street. We know where they are. And so in the way, the seller kind of hamstringed us because now his occupancy went up and ours went down. So, and anyway, it all came back because eventually the neighboring site, the further detail was that he had sold the neighboring site to the neighboring company, which was a Jeep dealership. And their plan was just to scrape the whole complex and make a parking lot out of it. So eventually they all came back to us, but that was a few years later. So anyway, we're in this deal. We just had a little dip on occupancy, and so far so good. We're sorting it out. And we're trying to Exxon the crap out of this deal, do all the tools and the crap that we learned. We're breaking out all the management books and the courses we've taken at Exxon, trying to apply all these different things. And it wasn't even close to an exact fit. It was just, because Exxon is a different, we almost had to dumb down a lot of the stuff because we're used to managing large EPC contracts, hundreds of $1 million contracts. And so now we're trying to manage these, $10,000, $20,000 subs. It just wasn't, it wasn't a direct correlation. They're like, what's a change order? Here's our sign this contract. What? No, here's a PO. So it's, we kind of spent a few months working with different subs, trying to get a quote to, paint the property, do some interior painting and stuff. And then we naturally just kind of had some scope growth. And it was also, we didn't have a detailed plan as far as what the rehab was when we closed on a loan, which was a big mistake. You should always know at least 80, 90% of what your plan is before you close on a loan. And of course, there's going to be some things that you're going to finalize after you close, but you should have a pretty good idea of what your business plan is before you close. And we did not. We knew we were changing the roof, but we left the interior renovation as a question mark. Because one, we're still based in Papua New Guinea. We actually hadn't seen it yet. And so we're just based everything on photos. And two, we just didn't know, right? So we're in this deal now. We're touring it with our subs, and they're giving us all these crazy ideas on things we can do. And for the most part, the rehab ended up being painting. We were adding washer and dryers, and we were adding washer and dryers, and we were adding central AC. So that was kind of our scope. So it grew to about a 10,000 per door renovation right out of the gate. And we were okay with that because we were funding it out of cash, and we knew that, okay, well, we were going to get this, bigger return. We thought it was going to be, we had calculated we'd get a good return out of it, but nothing crazy. We thought we were going to increase rents like $100. And so anyway, and also part of it was the scope was we're going to do 2 units and they're going to tell us what the cost was. It wasn't a GC who came in and told us the whole thing. They said, well, let's do 1 or 2 units. So we actually did 4 units, and we're in it and we're renovating. And part of the AC process is to get a permit. And so our property manager goes and applies for the permit. And part of the permitting process is you've got to submit an environmental. And we didn't do an environmental because it wasn't on the checklist for the lender, and we didn't know to do an environmental. So we go and do an environmental. And by the way, this property was built in 1964. So we do an environmental, comes back hot for asbestos in the joint compound. It was just over the limit. It had like the legal limits, like 2%, and we were just over that amount within the joint compound. So, I mean, my first email was, oh crap, and I sent that to our partner, and I said, we're in trouble. And then the next email is the property manager telling him, stop work, get all the guys off the site. Because, working in the oil industry, we're very familiar with asbestos. We know of all the risk involved and how you're supposed to handle it. So I knew that how to get those guys out of there. As soon as I became aware of it, get them off site. So we got them off site, and then we managed the inquisitive emails and calls we kept getting from them, wanting to know why we suddenly shut the site down. And so we just kept quiet and dodged that the best we could. And then, so now we're getting environmental guys involved. We're okay, well, how do we fix this? Now we know I'm 4 units physically down. I can't lease them because the walls are down, and I can't renovate them because it has asbestos. So I'm really stuck. I bought a property, and I basically took 4 units offline, 15% offline, and I have no way to get it back online.
A lot of people want to be profitable multifamily operators, but lack the knowledge, deal flow experience, and capital to be successful. They often try to overcome these challenges out of order, slowing or eliminating their ability to get their next deal done. We've developed a framework that allows them to gain the knowledge they need to find profitable deals. When they do, they create the time and location freedom, as well as the generational wealth they desire for their family. The Myers methods of multifamily investing have proved to be the fastest way to establish credibility and profitably grow an apartment portfolio. If you want to know more about our 4-step process, jump over to myersmethods.com to get our free 4-step guide to getting into multifamily investing. Let's get back to the episode.
So that's where we're at now. That's about 4 months into the property, or 5 months. Around that time, we get notice that the insurance that we purchased while the broker was a reputable broker, the insurance company that he had purchased it from was not. So he accidentally purchased fraudulent insurance, or the guy he purchased it from defrauded him. So we didn't have insurance now. And this is June, so we're going in. Hurricane season in Texas and Houston starts in June. So we had just started hurricane season, found out that we don't have insurance. And if you know anything about insurance, it's very hard to get insurance again if you've lost it while you still own the property. And you're now trying to put insurance on a property that you own that currently does not have it, just because it's from a risk perspective, they're viewing it as, there's potentially something that could have happened, and then you file a claim for it. So we were in a hot seat without the insurance, and then with asbestos. And then on top of that, I'd say at around the 6-month mark, I got laid off from my job. So now I went from this super high paid, making almost $250,000 a year engineer to making zero. And then also I had a negative cash flowing property, which I was the guarantor on full recourse. So it was a very bad situation 6 months into owning my first property. And then that's, the next day though, I think I was more pissed than upset, that it happened, that when I lost my job. And so the next day I joined a local real estate group, and luckily I kind of saw the writing on the wall 2 weeks prior, that something was about to happen. And so I'd already kind of started making plans, and plus the property was doing bad. So I'd already also for both regards knew that I need to find some mentors. I need to find some help. And so I attended a couple of real estate groups, just as introductory courses, and then finally found one that I liked. And then, so the day after I got laid off, I joined this real estate group. I spent, at the time, it was like $10,000 to join. And it was strange because I was like, typically people would join that group to learn how to buy an apartment complex. And I came to the group already owning an apartment complex, but had no idea what I was doing. So it was, a unique situation. And I spent no time telling everybody my story, saying, hey, this is the situation. All right. I need to fix this ASAP. What do you do? And everybody recommended I sell the property and take a loss, which for me didn't really sit well with me. I made a whole bunch of money, and the idea of taking a loss and losing a lot of the money I'd made, or majority of the money I'd made over that 5 years, and kind of starting back at zero, did not sit well with me. So I didn't listen. I found my business partner, my current business partner. I met her through this organization. She was the executive vice president of a very large management company that oversaw all of the properties for this real estate group, for the most part. At least the CEO's property as well. I know that. And anyway, she was kind of the only person in my corner that said, you could actually salvage this if you do you're in a great location. So like the one thing I did right, which I think just from luck, and it's the one thing, I did the one thing that I think everybody knows about real estate, and that's location, location, location. So I bought this property in an amazing location, which had I not done that one thing right, I wouldn't be here today. It'd be a completely different story. It would have been Joseph Bramante loses everything on first deal. So instead, we bought in a great location. And so the workaround was just to throw more money at it. So we went from doing initially a 3,000 per door renovation to what then grew to it was like a 10,000 per door renovation at what we were doing out of cash. And then ultimately, the solution to fix everything was a 30,000 per door renovation. And that involved coming with a plan, getting a proper general contractor who does multifamily, and to go in and bid the whole thing. And so we had everything bid out. We had a scope really defined really well, a nice, beautiful contract that, that's Exxon guys who like our contracts. So we had a great contract, and we went to work. So we put everything packaged up, got a new loan with a new lender that was a multifamily lender. We financed the rehab. And then the only additional thing I had to do to secure that new loan was I had to put additional money down as additional collateral. And this is all full recourse. But I didn't have any real additional collateral because I'm unemployed. So the only thing I had left was my 401k. So I cash out my 401k, I take the penalty. My partner puts in additional money as well. And so we secure this loan. And still to this day, and this is after that first year of ownership. So I'd owned it for a year, screwed everything up for 6 months, spent 6 months kind of learning the industry and finding a solution and getting the right team around me. And then we're at the end of the first year mark, and we're refinancing everything, putting in basically double. So we're putting in, so at this point, we've doubled our original investment into the deal, and still have made zero distributions and have no proof that it's going to work other than just the houses around me rent for more money. The houses around me are $1 million homes. And I think we had 1 or 2 comps for other properties showing that it worked, but still we were showing that we were going to increase rent like $600, which is a lot. And so, we went in and we cashed this out, kind of doubled down on stupid. If this would have failed, I would have basically been doubling down on stupid, but luckily it worked. So, it makes it look well, but we cashed everything, or I cashed everything out. I'm all in on this deal, and we get to work. And so we're getting away, and right away, the first thing we do is we redo. So prior, actually, we'd redone the asbestos contract. So our original bid to do the asbestos was like, it was more than $10,000 a unit. So we go and that's way too much. I mean, that we couldn't afford that. So we work with the guy and we say, what do we really need to abate here? Do we really need to abate everything? Or can we leave some walls in place? And so we actually didn't need to abate everything. We only abated the walls that we were getting behind. So, and also all the wet areas. So we did any wall that we were getting into, and then any wall that was a wet area or had plumbing for future needs. So in case we ever had to do a plumbing repair in the future, we could cut open that wall without any concern. So by decreasing the scope, we went from over $10,000 to under $1,500. So drastically cut down the price on the abatement. So we get in, we vacate the whole property because we didn't want guys in hazmat suits walking around occupied property with residents there, them seeing this stuff, and them deciding to call their attorney saying that, oh, it hurts when they breathe. So we went in and we just vacated the whole property and then went in and did the entire abatement. And then we went in and had the GC go behind them and we started renovating units. So start to finish, we've done it in about 9 months. And, we had change orders along the way, just like every project. You got some scope growth, and we went from Formica to granite counters, and I think we did one other kind of significant change. But for the most part, it kept it relatively reasonable. And we got the project done. So it was a 9-month ordeal, and it was stressful. And also around this time, so I closed on that loan. And then also I coincidentally get a job right at the beginning of 2013 because it's, I also have to support myself. And at the time I found a roommate. I was living with a roommate. I was paying like $400 a month in rent. So I was just like, I completely cut all my expenses just to really preserve all the capital I had left in my account, which, if I could do it over again, I would have given myself a better budget, because one of the mistakes I made is I just had, a couple $100,000 just sitting in my account, and I wasn't really like metering it. Like I wasn't, I wasn't monitoring it so much as much as I was spending. And so I wasted a lot of money just being a single guy in Houston without a job and too much money in my account. But anyway, hindsight 2020, I would have put up an auto distribute from my savings to my checking to give myself kind of an artificial paycheck to myself. But anyway, that's a pro tip for you as an entrepreneur. So anyway, I've really cut my expenses for the most part. My main expenses, although I tended to sometimes party a little too hard on the weekends initially, just kind of get over that depression, because being fired is really depressing, and that was depressing. And I didn't tell my parents or my family until like 2 years later. It was really, really embarrassing and depressing. So anyway, I did get a job after 6 months, and also because I was really focused on the real estate for that 6 months, because I had a property, I had everything. All my nest egg was in this one deal. So I took a bunch of these CCIM courses. I was going to these real estate groups, meetings, like on a regular basis, talking to anybody I could, really deep dive real estate for 6 months. That's all I did. And then I got a job. So beginning of 2013, I get this job right as we're signing the loan, starting the rehab. And I'm working in oil and gas sales, which was great. I mean, I was used to, the oil industry, so I had that background. And sales is, you're kind of making your own hours, and you work, sales is really up to you. So I was probably working half the time my actual day job and half the time my real estate kind of side hustle thing. So, but still, making good money. And also it's almost impossible to go from a high paying W-2 job to 100% real estate overnight. Like, you're just not going to happen. And I don't think at that time I'd really had the idea to be full-time real estate either. I was still at this time of the mindset to just save my money. Like, I knew, because I was in this real estate group, that people did make a living out of this. But still, for the most part, I was mostly like I needed to save my money and save the money that I had in this deal. And then I'll worry about doing syndications. So anyway, and plus I didn't have a track record, right? Like my track record was, yeah, look at me, look how badly I screwed up this deal. I had nothing to show people. If anything, I gave people a reason not to invest with me at that time. So I'm working now. I've got this rehab going on, still working really late hours, and also just kind of back up. So in the beginning, I was working for Exxon, and the cool thing, or the interesting thing, I guess, is because of the time zone difference. Because I was in Papua New Guinea, I would work until like 7:00 for Exxon, and then from 7 to about midnight or 1 a.m., I'd work my real estate job. And for Houston time, it was 9 to noon. So I was working in the mornings for Houston and all day for Exxon, just really burned the candle on both ends. But it's a unique situation because of the time zone. I realized you can't, if I was living here in Houston, I couldn't necessarily do that. It'd be a lot harder. But that was a unique thing. So anyway, back to present day. So 2013, I guess I'm working, doing the best I can to manage this rehab. And, we get in towards the end of 2013. We're doing the punch. Everything's going okay. We're spending the money. Still don't know if it's going to work or not. We purchased the property for $650,000. We've spent at this time over $600,000 on the rehab. So we've, spent almost as much as the purchase price. And then we started leasing, and it starts to lease up slowly but surely. Those first couple of leases, they're, a sigh of relief, then they come and they keep coming. And it's an interesting experience when you lease up a property, because it's been vacant. You don't know if it's going to work. And then, I'm just reminded of that Field of Dreams movie, right? If you build it, they will come. So we built it, we renovated it, and they came, and it was great. And then I just remember it when it all kind of came together, right? Like all this time, I'm just flying by instruments. I have no idea if this stuff's going to work. People are telling me it's going to work. And they said, oh, trust me, I've done this before, yada, yada. But I haven't done it. And I don't know if it's going to work. And if it doesn't work, I feel like a fool, right? And I've lost everything. I have no money. In fact, I owe the bank a bunch of money. So I'm in a really bad situation if this didn't work. But fortunately it did, right? The leases came. That was my first sign that, okay, it's working. Finally, we stabilized the property. We go to refinance, and we get that initial term sheet from the lender. And I'll tell you what, man, I was one of the happiest days of my life when I saw how much they appraised the property for. Like, I'm getting excited right now just thinking about it, because it was just so, man, it was such a relief. And to see like the loan proceeds were double what their purchase price was, so we did extremely well. And I was still a little bit of disbelief, right? I was still waiting for them to get an email and say, oh, sorry, I made a mistake. But I never got the email. They honored the term sheet. Everything was fine. Everything was correct. The appraisal came in correct. And at the end of the day, we took it from like a $650,000 purchase, invested $700,000, and then appraised at $3.4 million. So we just knocked out of the park on the first deal, on a deal that everybody told me to sell and take a loss. We just completely smashed it. So that at that point, now I had some credentials to go in and kind of, raise some money there. And so I beat that drum hard, and I raised a bunch of money, and we just did a whole bunch of value adds after that, because now it takes a whole lot to scare me, right? Because when you've been through a big rehab like that, every other rehab looks small, and now actually the rehab we're doing now is $37,000 per door renovation. And that one's big, and it's cool. It's taking a lot of our time and attention. But I still feel like that first one, that first big rehab you do is the monster, right? Like this one I'm doing now is bigger by dollar amount and by total rehab dollar amount. But the first one, because everything was so new, I didn't know, was the scariest for me. And I didn't know that it was going to work. I mean, I was told it was going to work because you read in the books, right? And, like engineers, we just read the book and we assume the book's true. So I was used to teaching myself by reading books, but I had no at this point I had a lot of money at stake. And so it's a little different when you're an engineer and you're in class and they're telling you the laws of physics and dynamics, all that crap. And you're like, yeah, I get it. Here's the formula. I do the formula. I get the answer. Cool. But it's another thing when it's like, okay, well, here you've got, $500,000 at stake. So now let's see if you're really going to pay attention. So that was the first deal, right? So we refinanced it. We made a 207% return on the refinance, still own it today. And now we're talking with architects to scrape the whole site and put probably a 12-story mixed use development on it. It's about $50 million development. And so it's just, and kind of goes back to buying right, and we bought right. And we always knew that they would have an ability to sell because of its location and whatnot. But we never really thought about redeveloping it until probably 5 years ago.
So you threw a lot there, man. What words of wisdom do you have for the listeners to wrap this episode up?
You're never going to know. You're never going to be ready. You can listen to every podcast you want, read every book, take every CSAM course you want. You're never going to be ready. Just go and do it. Now, that said, part of the reason why I made such a big return on my first deal was due to the cap rate compression. So I bought the property at a 12% cap rate, more or less, and we refinanced it at, I think, a 5 or a 6. So if we had done nothing to the NOI, we would have knocked out of the park. But because we also we increased the rents from 540 to 1,200, we doubled the NOI. That was a huge, that also increased our return. So for us, the reason we had such a big return was the compounding effect of both of those. Unfortunately, on deals these days, you don't have that compounding effect. You're not going to compress the cap rate that much. You might, if anything, you are in a cap rate expansion territory. But if you get a hairy enough deal and you buy it right, you can certainly compress it a couple of points maybe. But this was, 2011 post crash. So you're never going to get to those kind of returns or those kind of compression rates. So just be aware that you do have to be a bit more sophisticated when you're buying deals and do your homework. And I would say that also there's no reason to do it on your own. Like for us, if pay attention, a big part of my success was partnering and getting a team around me. I had a good manager, a good GC, I had a great equity partner with me who really believed in it. We actually brought in another equity partner later on. Prior to the refi, we brought in another equity partner to help also secure the deal, a minor equity partner. But that said, though, a lot of our value, was bringing in all these people with experience to help get it done. So it's not a one-man show. You definitely going to have a lot of people who are doing it. So don't try to learn everything and be the master at it. Just learn an area of it, get really good and master that one area, and then bring in people to help partner with and do that. So that said, though, I do try to keep, like our group, we've got, it's myself who does asset management. My two partners do the property management, and we just brought on a partner who does construction management. So we've got, all three areas of real estate covered, but it's still, there's the blame game, so to speak, as far as the roles and responsibility, who's doing what, is still very concentrated. So everybody knows what they're doing. It's very good communication. And I feel some of the risk you run into is you can get these really big GP groups with just a lot of guys. Everybody's so siloed and doing individual things that can be a detriment to you as well. So, on the one end, it's good to partner, but on the other end, do keep your group small, and you want to be, you do want to master this. You don't want to be a jack of all trades, master of one. Like, you want to master this stuff and be the best at what you can be the best at your area of the multifamily spectrum, whatever it is that you're doing.
Joseph, I really appreciate you sharing with our listeners, man. You had a tremendous amount of value today. We'll talk real soon, man. Thanks.
See you, man. Thanks for having me.
You made it to this juncture, so you really love what we shared on this episode of Myers Methods Presents Multifamily Missteps. Do us a favor, give us a 5-star rating, give us a review, and share this with somebody who's interested in multifamily investing. Until the next time, the pack is with you.